Welcome to Afghannews with Mohsen Jamal. Afghanistan's local government directorate on Wednesday announced areas expected to transfer from NATO to Afghan control as part of a second phase of transition due to end across the country in 2014. Badakhshan, Badghis, Balkh, Daikundi, Ghazni, Ghor, Helmand, Herat, Kabul, Laghman, Nangarhar, Nimruz, Parwan, Samangan, Saripul, Takhar and Wardak provinces are likely to be announced by President Hamid Karzai at next month's regional conference in Istanbul, said the body's director Abdul Khaliq Farahi. Most of Herat and Kabul were already handed over to Afghan control in a first wave of transition in July, but some districts remain under NATO's remit. Karzai will announce the names of the provinces at Istanbul conference on November 2nd. Farahi, director of the Independent Directorate for Local Government, told a news conference in Kabul. In the second phase of transition, there are 17 provinces, but some of them will transfer authority for the entire province. Others include districts. Farahi added, NATO combat troops are scheduled to withdraw from Afghanistan by the end of 2014, by which time Afghan forces should be responsible for national security. At least 10 people have been killed and dozens of others injured after a fuel tanker targeted by a bomb burst into flames in northern Afghanistan. Officials said the lorry was in a queue to get into Bagram Air Base, the largest military base in Afghanistan, when the incident occurred on Wednesday in the Bagram district of Parwan province. Roshna Khalid, a provincial spokesperson, said that a smaller explosion Tuesday night caused by a magnet bomb made a hole in the lorry. When people had gathered to collect the pooling fuel, that the bigger explosion took place. On Wednesday, he said. Khalil Farhangi, the provincial hospital chief, said at least 3 people were killed on the scene with 47 wounded, while the Interior Ministry said up to 39 were injured. Although no group has claimed responsibility for the explosion, Abdul Basir Salangi, Parwan's governor, said this was a terrorist attack. A key Afghan insurgent group led by a former warlord has said that it is willing to pursue direct or indirect reconciliation talks with the United States without any preconditions. Pakistan's The Express Tribune has quoted Dr. Ghairat Bahir, a senior leader of Bulliten Hikmatyar's Hizb Islami militant group, as saying that it is to enter into peace talks with the United States. However, he hastened to add that such a dialogue must take place in a country other than the United States and Afghanistan. Dr. Bahir, who is also the son-in-law of Hikmatyar, said that the United States would have to establish its seriousness to a political settlement of the Afghan imbroglio before any dialogue took place. Hizb Islami has been fighting the US-led NATO troops in Afghanistan and is also actively involved in the Afghan politics at the same time. Meanwhile, a senior commander for the Haqqani network said on Tuesday that the insurgent network will not take part individually in any peace talks with the United States, and negotiations must be led by the Taliban leadership. Referring to the Taliban Leadership Council, the Haqqani group commander has told Reuters that the American would not be able to find a possible solution to the Afghan conflict unless they hold talks with the Taliban Shura. Last week, U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton in Islamabad, with a heavyweight team of U.S. military and intelligence leaders, urged Pakistan to persuade the Haqqanis to pursue peace, warning that tough action would have to be taken against Afghan and Pakistani militants if they did not cooperate in efforts to stabilize Afghanistan. The Haqqani commander, speaking on condition of anonymity, viewed her efforts with skepticism, saying that this is not the first time the United States has approached them for peace talks, but they rejected several such attempts for talks as they are an integral part of the Taliban led by Mullah Muhammad Umar. The European Union plans to provide assistance and development aid in Afghanistan beyond the complete handover of security responsibility to Afghans scheduled for 2014, the U.S. Afghanistan representative said on Tuesday. The international community is planning to draw down its military presence in Afghanistan in coming years, while the NATO-led International Security Stance Force now is scheduled to hand responsibility for security to Afghan authorities in 2014. U.S. Special Representative for Afghanistan, Vygaudas Yusak, has said that the the EU would remain a presence after 2014. He told reporters in Brussels that it is important to convey to the European public that they cannot afford the mistakes of the 1989 hands-off policy in Afghanistan in the region. Yusaka said he hoped that EU POL, Afghanistan, and EU mission to help Afghanistan take responsibility for law and order would continue longer than its current mandate, which runs until the end of 2013. A July United Nations report asserting that only 30 civilians died in targeted raids in Afghanistan during the first 6 months of 2011 reflected only a very small fraction of night raids in which civilians were killed, according to officials of the Independent Afghan Commission, which had co-produced the 2010 report on civilian casualties with the UN mission. The report on civilian casualties by the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan attributed 80% of the 1,462 civilian deaths it counted during the 6 months period to the Taliban, and only 14% of them to pro-government forces. The report credited the U.S. NATO military command with reducing civilian casualties and night raids during the 6 months period by 15% compared with the same period last year. But officials of the Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission, which collaborated with UNAMA on its 2010 civilian casualties report, said that the number of night raids that UNAMA investigated in some fashion could only have been a very small proportion of the total number of targeted raids with civilian casualties. A leading official of the Independent Commission has also objected publicly to UNAMA's exclusion from the total in last year's report of most of the allegations of civilian deaths and raids that had been brought to its attention. Turkey is clinging to hopes of finding survivors under rubble 3 days after a powerful earthquake killed at least 459 people in the southeast, as the government finally requested foreign help to shelter thousands of homeless families. Complaints over the lack of tents have grown louder with each passing day, and some desperate survivors fought among themselves to try and grab tents being distributed by relief workers from the back of a lorry. The 7.2 magnitude quake was Turkey's most powerful in a decade, having started out by saying Turkey could handle the disaster alone. Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan's government put out requests on Tuesday to 30 countries for emergency materials, including prefabricated housing, tents, and containers. Meanwhile, on Tuesday evening, a strong aftershock with a 5.4 magnitude hit the Van region, the Kandili Observatory and Earthquake Research Institute said. Sporadic explosions and gunfire have been heard in the Yemeni capital Sana'a hours after the government announced a ceasefire with breakaway general and armed opposition tribes. On Tuesday evening, residents of the Hasaba and Sofa neighborhoods reported that they could still hear fighting nearby after the 3 p.m. ceasefire deadline earlier announced by state television. According to the earlier government announcement, in Metal, President Ali Abdullah Saleh has reached a ceasefire agreement with dissident General Al-Mohsen Al-Ahmer. After the fighting seemed to continue on Tuesday, state television said that the truce was stabilizing and that a mediation committee set up to negotiate the ceasefire was still making contact with all parties. Saleh, who has ruled for 33 years, also summoned the ambassador from the will see him step down, a promise he has made several times before. And that NATO should stay involved in Libya until the end of this year to help prevent loyalists of Muammar Gaddafi from leaving the country. Mustafa Abdel Jalil, the interim leader, has said NATO, whose air attacks backed National Transition Council forces that overthrew Gaddafi in August, is to decide on Friday whether to end its mission following his death and burial in the past week into liberation declaration by the NTC. At a news conference in Doha on Wednesday, Jalil said that they look forward to NATO continuing its operations until the end of the year, adding that they also seek technical and logistics help from neighboring and friendly countries to stop the flight of Gaddafi supporters to other countries. Qatar was one of the first countries to recognize the NTC as the legitimate authority in Libya and supplied the anti-Gaddafi forces with water, weapons, and more than $400 million in aid. That's all for now. Thanks for staying with us.